Hey everyone, and this is our 22nd session, and we are today doing chapter number 8, that is Pad or Padati, right? So it means that there are two realities in existence. One is the nature, and other is the space, and both are basically, while space is the ground of all being, and the all the beings are at different planes, right? So that is the distinction that basically this chapter makes. And so here, I'm inviting Achal Bhaiya. So he has given a very nice introduction. We have seen his has two he has twins. They have Ankita, and they have a twins, and they have named them Dhi and Dhriti. They are two kriyas of Buddhi, and such a amazing names that you have given to your daughters. And we saw the beautiful pictures as well, that you have shared with us. So here is a very warm welcome to you, Achal Bhaiya. Please lead us through the chapter.
Thank you, everyone. I hope my screen is visible.
Yes, and your picture, your photo is also very nicely embedded.
Great. So I think this should work now. First of all, once again, namaste, everyone. I think Raghav Bhaiya, Satyavrat Bhaiya, and Shubha Didi have also joined us. So, आप सभी को नमस्ते.
Namaste.
Um,
Namaste.
Namaste, Didi. So, I was thinking this is a very small chapter. I mean, it's got 2 or 3 pages, 2 pages specifically. I mean, we can take it a bit slow as well, I'm assuming. And I was also hoping that maybe if we can, I mean, rather than me taking it as a monologue, if we can have some discussions, a kind of a format that I was thinking was ki maybe if I read 2, 3 anubhutis, and then we can open it for discussion where I mean, I'll keep my interpretation as well, and what you think about it, the kind of observations that you want to make, and if there are any questions that you would want to discuss. So if we can keep them as well. So would this be a good format? Can we do
Yes,
something like this?
indeed. That will be very nice. Yeah.
Great. So I think I can begin. First of all, I would like to pay my gratitude to Babaji. I mean, for propounding this darshan, where I mean, just going back to my life, the kind of story that I shared. So in 2010, actually, what happened was I had my first Parichay Shivir, and interestingly, Rakesh Bhaiya was also there in that Shivir, and I was just out of school, first year of college, and I was just going through the content, the Parichay Shivir, and I mean, I had all those questions and from science and from spirituality and whatnot, but somehow I was not able to grasp what Darshan is trying to say and what this proposal is. You know, I mean, just fresh out of school, so you don't see the world, you don't understand what things are going along. And then 2010, I went through it. One conclusion that stayed with me was that I am looking for continuity of happiness. This thought had not occurred to me before that. Before that, I just assumed that, you know, the goal of life is to maybe earn as much as you can or become the biggest the company of a CEO of a big IT company or a software company, and that is what life is all about. You know, having fun and maybe leaving it all aside and just going uh, uh, for that alone, going to the Himalayas. So these were the kind of images that I used to have. So from 2010, the first thing that I could conclude was what I am essentially looking for is continuity of happiness, right? But how to get that? That was a conclusion that I was not able to reach then. Fast forward 9 years of experimenting with all sorts of materialism and idealism and all the paths provided by them. And then I was in a stage of life where I was feeling helpless. I mean, I've tried everything. I mean, whatever I had desired, I have either received it or I know I'll be able to get it. But then this does not make sense. I mean, the more I move forward, I realize I'm not going towards the direction which gives me that continuity of happiness. So what's wrong? What's actually not working out? I mean, how is life going like this? And that is when 2019, again, December, I was reintroduced. I watched the I attended the Parichay Shivir happening in Raipur by Somtauji. And once I attended that, I realized, oh, how to live, why to live. These are the questions that I had been wondering on. And this is where the answer is. So once you get that sense of direction, and I realized, this is what I was looking for. This is where I wanted to be. And all this is possible because one man did not have his answers. He actually gave his life. He took that risk. Maybe this will work out, maybe it will not work out, but he took that risk. He went on, and he actually did the whole sadhana, whatever the tradition had given him. And then this is how we have this darshan right now with us, which has all the answers, all the logical consistent things, how life should be, how things can go around. So when I'm saying this, I feel a sense of gratitude for him. Because of him, now this whole knowledge, this whole darshan is available to us. So before starting, gratitude to Babaji, and then to everyone who has been involved in this this whole this whole abhiyan, because I have never met Babaji personally, but because of the likes of Som Tauji and Sunpal Tauji and Rakesh Bhaiya and every one of you, I have been able to get this knowledge for me and understand this and be able to discuss with you. So this whole English reading session has been it has been a tremendous help in this whole path of moving forward. So before we begin, gratitude all of you, and I feel immense joy that we are doing this together. So with that, uh, I'll begin. So chapter 8, plane and the transplane, right? So the first Anubhuti says, plane and transplane are the differentiations of reality, right? Before I analyze it, I'll just read the next line as well. The classification of planes is accomplished by studying the order and combination of their form, attributes, intrinsic nature, and dharma in a comparative way. Therefore, planes are many and transplane is omnipresent. So, just trying to give some context here, the way I understood is ki, Bana Vihara Darshan has a very interesting structure to it. I mean, you start with existence is coexistence, then you come down to gratitude, then that is followed by Shrishti Darshan, that how things are, and slowly and steadily you get onto ki, okay, how things are in order, and then you come to the human order, and then human order you start with. So the last time that we learned was human behavior, which Dev Bhaiya took it. So once you reach that human behavior, the next thing that comes across is ki, what is the basis of this? And how do you really come from that human behavior to the plane and the transplane? So when you see the whole existence around it, and we try to classify it, if you have to understand it, so there are so many units, there are so many variations. But to really understand what is happening, we intend to have some sort of classification around how the thing is actually, to understand it. These classifications are essentially for human understanding. How do we make sense of this whole existence? What is going across? So from that sense, the first thing that Babaji is doing here, which I see from the first Anubhuti, is if you look at this reality, the two most basic classifications, the differentiations that can be done are the plane and the transplane, right? So plane and transplane, and this plane can be further classified on the basis of form, attributes, intrinsic nature, and dharma. And this has to be done in a comparative way. So when we are saying comparative way, whenever you are trying to make this classification, this cannot be an absolute classification. The whole classification will always happen when you compare two units on the basis of their form, on the basis of their attributes, their intrinsic nature and dharma, and then you try to understand, okay, what are the interrelations between them? What are the different points between them? What is the variety of this form, variety of these attributes? And thus comparing that, we reach into this classification of planes. So because the planes can have all these sorts of classification, the planes are many. The numbers vary, and we have specific. When Babaji does it, he classifies it into four specific planes. But now when we talk about transplane, there cannot be any sort of classification that can apply to transplane. Why? Because the transplane does not have this form, those attributes, this intrinsic nature. It is not in units. It is not something which can be measured by limited. It cannot be something which is, which can be seen as a form. That transplane, that is why when we see it, we say it is omnipresent. It is omniscient, right? So these are the fundamental classification, I mean, the differentiations, plane and the transplane, and then the plane can be classified. So the four classifications that we do for the plane are, the first is the physico-chemical plane, which we know as, I mean, all of you have already been through the whole sessions and been to, so you already know of the physico-chemical plane, right? The next plane is the delusion plane. The third plane is the deific plane, the Dev pad जिसे कहते हैं, deific plane. And the fourth one is the divine plane. So these are the classifications. I'll repeat again: the physico-chemical plane, the delusion plane, the deific plane, and the divine plane. So based on all these form attributes, intrinsic nature, and dharma, and then comparing it in a comparative way, we reach these four classifications. Right? Going forward, the plane of an entity is determined by a combination of its form, order, which is intrinsic nature, and their inherent strength and power. This itself is its state and motion, right? So this one is an extension to the second Anubhuti that we've read. When you're thinking of an entity, the plane is again determined by the combination, which we had studied earlier, the order and combination of its form, order, the intrinsic nature, and the inherent strength and power. So when I'm seeing this form and the intrinsic nature, so if you see here, we have classified it as in the form things, form, attributes, intrinsic nature, and dharma. But here it is form, order, and order. So essentially here, what I assume from here is that when you are talking about form, so form and attributes have been clubbed as form, and uh, intrinsic nature and dharma have been clubbed here. But this and this refer to the same four attributes that we're talking about: the form, attributes, intrinsic nature, and dharma. The next thing that he adds is their inherent strength and power, right? So uh, all these entities that we're talking about, they have some inherent strength, the bal and shakti. And this is again, in different terms, could be said as their sthiti and gati. What I gather from that is that whenever I look at entity, I mean, if this is this, just let's just take an example of an atom, let's say a hydrogen atom, right? So this hydrogen atom belongs to the physicochemical state. When you look at the hydrogen atom, so there is a state associated to it, right? So there is a particle at the center, there's a particle which is revolving around that particle. So there is this form attached to it, and that is in a state. But then this whole particle also interacts with the particles around it. It interacts with all the entities that are around it in predefined ways according to certain laws. So then it always has this inherent state, and it also is in motion. And this is what, so it can be said in two terms. It has a strength, which is its state, and it has a power, the way which it interacts with everyone. It can also be said as that is state and motion. So these are the two things which are indicating the same set of the facets that we are talking about. So yes, I think these are the three anubhutis that I would cover once. I would like to open this for discussion now. If is any other points that you would like to add, and any other facets that you would like to, or any questions that you want to discuss, so we can take it from here, and then we'll move on to the next anubhutis.
Yeah, I think very good start for the thing. It sets the stage for this thing. Anyone wants to basically ask anything so far? So the two realities, plane and transplane, and then he also described that the plane can are the entities or the units, and the units are having four dimensions to them: form, attributes, intrinsic nature, and dharma. And so there we basically, so we are talking about transplane as one reality, that is the ground of all being, and the planes are some things with which uh, basically there are four planes of them and are at different levels of their um, evolution or emergence. So and there is a interrelationship between these planes. Yeah, which we will understand. So far, any yes, Shilpa Didi.
Shilpa Didi has raised his hand.
Yeah,
Sorry.
so I just wanted to know that in these, like we said, the four orders and like these planes, the four planes. So is there any difference, or are we talking about the same thing?
So I take it here.
Or is this a different concept altogether?
G. So, Didi, the way I see it, so if we talk about four orders, so there's the material order, there's the plant order, the animal order, and the human order. So if you look into it now, those orders and the physicochemical planes, I mean the four planes that we're talking about, they have this parallel structure to them, but they are a bit different in terms of classification. If you look into the physicochemical plane, so the material order and the plant order, I mean the biological order, both of them come into this physico-chemical plane, right? As you move on to the animal order and the kind of I mean the humans that are living in Jeev Chetna, the delusion, living still in delusion. So this would come into the delusion plane. Now what if you expand the human plane? Now human plane would actually expand into three planes. One would be the delusion plane, the next would be the deific plane, and then would be the divine plane. So that is how I see the parallelism. I mean, once again, just to summarize it, the plant or I mean the material order and the biological order would be in the physico-chemical plane. Then the animals and the human beings would be in the delusion plane. Human beings still in delusion state in the delusional plane, and the humans being again can be into the deific plane and the divine plane. If anyone else would
Okay,
like to add
got
to
it.
it.
Yeah. No, very nice. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's an important distinction. The four orders are more like mm, material order, biological order, animal order, and knowledge order. But these planes are something which basically describes them, uh, kind of compartmentalizes them. That one plane does not, and there is no commonness between one plane with the other. Like for example, that which is insentient, जो जड़ है वो चैतन्य नहीं हो सकता, राइट? और जो चैतन्य है वो जड़ नहीं हो सकता. That which is sentient cannot be insentient, and that which is insentient cannot be sentient. So there is a clear demarcation across the planes, right? So that is one thing. Second thing is that you see that that which is diluted cannot be awakened, and that which is awakened cannot be diluted. So there are two planes are there. There are two levels of being, or you can call them two realms are there. So and so then after that, in the same way, then there is a state of awakening and awakening completeness, right? That is the divine plane is different from the deific plane. So we'll come to that in the due course. So these are two different ways of classifying, and these classifications have significance. Yeah.
So yeah, thanks for adding that. So I mean, as I understand that this was a very important classification that once you go to one other plane, so these planes you cannot go back. I mean, once you're awakened, you cannot get delusion again. Or once you become Gatan Poon, constitutionally complete, you cannot then go back. So it's kind of a very interesting this thing.
जी.
So meanwhile, Chani Didi, Ujjwal Bhaiya, Richa Didi, they've also joined us. So namaste everyone once again.
Namaste, namaste.
Namaste, Bhaiya. Namaste, everyone.
Namaste Didi. So just to say it again, so because this is a very short chapter and we have ample time, so the kind of format that we're following is that I'll be taking two, three Anubhutis once, and then we'll open it for discussion. So it could kind of a parallel discussion. So we could just keep on discussing, and you can have, or if you have any questions or for discussions or any other points or any other facets that you'd like to add, so we can do that as well. Great. So I'll move on to the next one. Right. That which does not belong to any plane or is not bounded, wherein all the planes are contained or in which they are encompassed, is referred to as transplane. This is the omnipresent omnipotence only. Right. So this one is a very interesting. When I look at, I was just wondering, why? I mean, because once you've been through 6 chapters, this has been covered multiple times. Vyapak Vastu and the difference between the units and the omnipresent. So once again, what I see is, traditionally there was always this thing that, I mean, tradition, when I'm talking about the Vedic tradition. So it was assumed that once you reach a level of enlightenment, you become one with this transplane. I mean, this was what was supposed, that then there is no coming back, and you become a part of this whole Vyapak Vastu or the Brahm that was used, it was said. So here Babaji is trying to, I mean, what I have seen from it is that he's specifically pinpointing it. That which does not belong to any plane, the divine plane, the deific plane, they are here. This transplane is a separate entity altogether. If you've become enlightened, you do not become part of this transplane. You still are a plane, you are still a unit. So that which does not belong to any plane or is not bounded, wherein all the planes are contained or in which they are encompassed, is referred to as transplane. This is the omnipresent omnipotence only, right? So it's a very clear distinction. You cannot classify this omnipresent omnipotence into planes because it cannot be classified. You cannot divide it. You cannot, you cannot break it down into pieces or form its separations. I mean, if you do it, so one of the terms that we use for this omnipotence is aseem, and this it is vyapak. So if you look into it, if you try to divide it or classify it, you are trying to put a boundary across it, but you cannot do it because it does not have any boundary. So then it cannot also be classified in any sense. That is why it cannot be a part of the plane. It is transplane. It transcends the whole structure of plane. And yet this is the basis, the Aadhar of all the planes. So in that sense, there is a clear distinction between the planes and the transplane, right? Now we come back to the planes again. The order and combination of forms are differentiated by their shape, volume, and density. The order and combination of words are differentiated by their sound, modulation, language, and definition. The order and combination of attributes are differentiated as generative, mediative, and degenerative. Right. So this again, we have come back to the planes and the units. So the first one, the order and combination of forms are differentiated by the shape, volume, and density. So if you look, earlier we had, in the second one, we had talked about the classification of planes by order and combination from form, attributes, interpretation, and dharma. So here he's again analyzing it into more, I mean, breaking it out into more divisions. So then if we look into the forms can again be differentiated by their shape, volume, and density, right? And we do this. I mean, if you have to look at the example that I took of, let's say the hydrogen atom. So when you look at it, how do you actually differentiate the forms? So every atom has its own form. I mean, the number of particles that are in the center and the number of particles that are revolving around that, they are different for different atoms. So that way, depending on their shape, you can actually differentiate them. And similarly, with anything that has a kind of a form, you this is how you differentiate it. I mean, if you see an apple and an orange, so when you see an apple, you see that it has a specific shape, it has a specific color, it has a specific density. The same thing goes with orange. So this is how you can differentiate the forms. The second one about the sound. Now, this one is not specified in the second Anubhuti, and I found it as a surprise. But then, if you look at the older editions, it was actually specified as sound. So I think it was changed from the earlier Anubhuti, but the analysis has stayed. But from that sound part, I mean, if you differentiate a kind of a word, I mean, every word is essentially pointing to a reality, but then word is also indicating that. So it is used as an indicator. And if you look into that word, I mean, if you look in how do you, for example, I am saying, how do you? So how, do, and you are able to identify them as separate entities, right? So when I say how, it has a very specific sound to it, a very specific modulation to it. All of them are in the same language in English, but then how, do, and you, all of them have a different definition. So that is how we are able to differentiate every word, right? And those words essentially point to a reality. And if you look at that reality is also going to have some sort of uh, I mean, some sort of form or interpretation. That is how you classify it. One more thing from the sound that I'm just reading between the lines is that, you know, again, traditionally, I mean, once you get into chapter 8, I started thinking that, Darshan has this interesting thing that the books are written where there are certain things which are original, the words are specifically pointing to the reality. And then there are certain chapters which are trying to clarify more about what was written in the traditions, in the Vedic traditions, or any other traditions from the idealism. And then he's trying to clarify certain points. So this second sentence, I am trying to relate it with that in traditional sense, when we're talking about sound, it was always said as, specifically in the Bhakti mark, it was assumed that Ram ka naam he, matlab, there are certain things that where the sound was described as, if you can reach the sound, you are able to reach the reality as well. I mean, if you take the name sufficient number of times, you are able to reach that reality. So that was the kind of belief that was happening. So here I'm thinking that maybe this belief is clearly addressed in terms of this sound which is indicating. So when you are saying that sound, so the sound as a reality has its sound, its modulation, its language, its definition. So these are the words that have a different entity. But just by saying Vyapak, I am not reaching that entity. The व्यापक वस्तु उसका अनुभव ही करना पड़ेगा. I mean, just by saying Vyapak or the omniscient or the omnipresent, I'm not reaching that reality, right? That reality has to be experienced, that reality has to be realized, reality has to be, I mean, I have to reach that enlightened base to actually reach to that reality. The sound itself is an indication by which I'm trying to reach that reality. So if you analyze the sound, it could be differentiated, the words can be differentiated based on this, but then the reality is a separate thing which has to be differentiated based on the reality itself and not the sound of it. So I mean, this is my interpretation of it, and I'm just reading between the lines. So if any other facets you would like to add, we'll open it for that. Just the third line now. The order and combination of attributes are differentiated as generative, mediative, and degenerative. So again, from the last one, when we were talking about attributes, the attributes can be, as it said, as udbhav. I mean, generative is when something is getting built, mediative is when it is getting maintained, and degenerative is then it is converted into a different form. So that form is essentially, it degenerates into a different form. So then, based on that attributes, when I'm interacting with when entity interacting with another entity, so those attributes in their interrelationships, this entity can have a generative effect on this one, or a mediative effect, or a degenerative effect. So that way we can see the attributes of an entity, and this is how we are defining the planes as well. Uh, right. So I think these two Anubhuti, the third one we can take it back. So before that, if I'll open it for a discussion, if you like to add to this, we can do that. I think we are on time. Yeah, right.
Yeah,
So
this was very well explained. It was very nice. I don't have anything to add. Anyone else would like to ask anything?
Ji, Shilpa Didi.
Yeah, so like what you said about Ram Ka Naam, it's very interesting and worth contemplating. It's really beautiful what you said about it.
जी
जी, thank you, Didi. So
जी भैया, you
great,
could move further.
great. Okay, so I think Sanjana Didi has also joined us. Didi, namaste.
Namaste, Namaste, Bhaiya. How are you?
I am doing pretty good. So thanks for joining. And so we are doing a basic discussion sort of a thing where we are reading it across. And if you have anything to add, you're open to do that.
I had just
Yes,
one question.
yes, Bhaiya.
Actually,
Yes, yes. Sure, Spencer.
Well, it's very small, and I think I get the idea without it, but seeing as how you've gone into it, in lots of detail, I'm just wondering, do you see a difference, or how do you distinguish between sound and modulation, those two words?
Right. So I'm not sure if this is the correct interpretation, but I'll still keep what I've understood from that. So, when you're talking about any kind of a word, let's say if I say word, so there is a kind of there is a consonant attached to it, right? So there's a k, ch, t, t. I mean, just going to a bit more detail. So this is essentially known as nad, right? So nad has been said as there have been two nad, ahat nad and anahat nad. Ahat is when anything when two things come together, right? So they kind of have this interaction and then they make a sound. So that is the sound specifically that is known as the nad, as I see it. And then there is this thing that which the way if I saying it, for example, when I say a, e, the vowels that I'm talking about, so those provide that modulation in a way that these sounds, how they're connected to the next sound together. And it also conveys a sort of an expression. I mean, if I'm trying to say the same word, I can say it with different modulations and they convey different sense of emotions. It could be the same word having the same sound, right? Word, word, word. Depending on what emotion I want to convey, I can modulate my voice to do that. This could be done in different languages, and then every word has an associated definition. But this is how I differentiate between the sound and modulation. If anyone else has more addition to it or studied in detail, they can share their perspective as well.
Very well explained. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Yeah, it makes sense. Though very well, I had some sense like modulation could be like that, but the way you describe it, the vowels and the it definitely clarifies it.
Right. Thank you. So, just to be clear, I mean, I'm not specifically saying that vowels would be modulation. I'm just saying that modulations, they make use of vowels a lot, compared to the consonants. But vowels, they would come under the sound, and the modulation would be that tonality or the kind of the thing behind it, the expressiveness behind it, probably. Right.
It makes sense. Yeah.
So, should we move to the next Anubhuti?
जी भैया.
Right. Great. So the next one is the accomplishment through law and process is referred to as a reality within the plane. Conduct itself is the law. Great. I'll read a couple more and then, okay, I think I can take this one separately as well. So right. So this one, I had a different interpretation of it, but then I had a talk with Rakesh Bhaiya, and he actually gave me an interpretation which now fits better to my this one. So if you look at to this, the accomplishment through law and process is referred to as a reality within a plane, and conduct itself is the law. Now, these are very, if I go a bit of analysis into this, so if you look into it, any sort of reality, right? Any sort of an entity, it has reached there through certain law and process. It cannot break that law. I mean, that law is in existence itself, right? And any change that happens to a reality. So, for example, if a gutton, if in a constitutionally incomplete atom becomes constitutionally complete, there is a law and a process behind it. And through that law and process, that reality has come within that plane, right? as Rakesh Bhai was saying, you cannot go back. And going forward through those planes, there has to be this whole set of steps that you follow. So there's this process, and all of those are governed by a law, right? And when you look into this law is nothing, it's not human made. I mean, the way we, when we write down a constitution, so we say, "Ki, okay, this is the law, or this is how things are going to be, and this is how the punishment is going to be." And so it's a written constitution or it's a verbal constitution. But that is what we are saying to this law, those rules or those sounds or those written statements. But here, when we are talking about the law, this is not a written down rule. This is the conduct of that entity itself, which is the law. So how do you get that law? You look at that entity. For example, when you say, let's say, I have to talk about ki, what are the laws of an enlightened human being. So how do I find that law? The conduct of that enlightened human being, right? It is not just ki I have written down ki these are the rules he's going to follow or she's going to follow. It is the conduct of an enlightened being that has to be observed. That itself is the law, and then this conduct can be then written down in words, and then rules can be made around it or policies can be made around it. But the fundamental source of that law is the conduct of that human being. So that is how we reach to this, that the accomplishment through law and process referred to as a reality within that plane, and then that conduct itself is the law, right? Moving forward, the next one says the realization or the knowledge in the all pervasive, inherent, and uniform omnipotence is referred to as the transplane reality because its existence is realized. This uniform omnipotence is at the root of all activities, and it is inherent in humans in the form of knowledge, which becomes evident, right? So the realization or knowledge in the all pervasive, inherent, and uniform omnipotence is referred as to the uh, okay. I'll just try to analyze it a bit. One thing is quite clear, that this uniform omnipotence and omnipresence is everywhere, right? It is all around us, it is within us, we are pervaded, we are submerged at it, right? And yet, if I have to say for myself, I have not observed it. I mean, I have some perception of it. I logically try to deduce it, right? But if I have to say, "Ki, okay, I have seen this or I have realized this," I cannot say it. So if it is here and if it is all around me and it is within me, it is, I'm submerged in it. Why cannot I see it? Why cannot I realize it? What is stopping me, right? So now what is happening is, this is inherent in humans in the form of knowledge. But when we're talking about those humans, and it will also get clearer later, I need to have certain sense of ability within me to be able to see it. This knowledge might be there, but if I am not capable enough, I don't have that ability, I don't have that preparation. If I am not prepared to see it, it is not evident to me. But someone who has been, I mean, who's able to see this. So when we're talking about an enlightened human being, the one we are talking about, when we said the conduct is the law, this enlightened human being, when he evidences that knowledge, when he sees that knowledge, when he experiences that knowledge, this becomes, this is inherent in that human in the form of knowledge, which becomes evident. Now, when you're seeing that enlightened human being, when you're interacting with him, when you're seeing his conduct, the same omnipresence is now presenting itself. It is evidencing in itself in the form of knowledge, in the form of conduct through that human being, right? So it is, so here you can see the existence of these planes and transplanes. This transplane is omnipotent, it is omniscient, it exists, it is there, right? But if to make it evident, to actually see its evidence from different planes, the planes need to be there. You cannot, I mean, this transparent reality can be observed, can be realized by an entity in the planes. So that is how there's this coexistence between them, right? And that is what we are saying is that this unke astitva ka anubhav hai, that its existence is realized by an enlightened human being, right? Now, moving forward, omnipotence is referred to as omnipresence because it exists uniformly everywhere. Therefore, the transplane is omnipresent, planes are many and bounded, and units are infinite. Right. So this is again clear from the earlier ones. So omnipotence, why is it called omnipresence? Because it exists uniformly everywhere, right? And I would want to highlight this exists uniformly everywhere, right? So this now this is very interesting. If you look at the planes, now the same plane, I mean the physico-chemical plane and the delusion plane and the deific plane or the divine plane, all of these planes are in the same omnipotence, in this same omnipresence present reality, right? And they all have access to the same reality. Now, if this would have been non-uniform in different places, I mean, just I'm trying to give a logical essence to it. So what would happen if I go here, I would be I would be behaving in one way. If I go here, I would be behaving in another way. But that does not happen, right? I am powered by that. I have it as my strength and power wherever I go, wherever I am. So it does not depend on where you are. So that is how it is uniform everywhere. And that is why it is referred to as the omnipresence, right? And because it is the source of the strength and power for all these entities that belong to the planes, it is known as the omnipotence. So based on that, we are able to say that the transplane is omnipresent, right? But the planes themselves are many and bounded. I mean, if I look at any entity, it is bounded by the six sides, and it would always have certain set of space that is occupying, right? So it is not uniform everywhere. It has that certain space where it is. But if you look into that omnipresent reality, that is uniform everywhere. It is everywhere. That is why it is omnipresent. So that is the basic distinction that you can do between the planes and the transplane, right? And again, the units are infinite. I mean, they are uncountable. You cannot, they just keep on, I mean, it cannot be counted by human beings. So that since they are infinite. Great. So, I think one more I can cover. What is the time? 8:43. Yeah, we have sufficient time. So each unit is situated in its respective plane upon development or decline according to their potential, ability, and receptivity, right? So this was something that I had also covered in the previous one when I said that every unit situated in its own respective plane. These planes, the characteristics that we have defined earlier that depend on this form interest attributes, also depending on every plane entity, depending on the plane it has certain potential. I mean, if you look into the physico-chemical plane, any entity belonging to that plane had certain potential. Let's say a plant, or let's say an atom. And for example, a hydrogen atom, that hydrogen atom is not going to discuss about, or a plant is not going to discuss about the Jivan Kriya, or it would not have that question key, why to live and how to live. That questioning starts with the plane of the delusion plane. I mean, unless you do not enter that delusion plane, you do not have karma swatantrata or uh, kalpanashilta, right? So that way, depending on the plane that entity belongs to, it has certain potential. Based on that potential is the whole expanse of that entity where it can perform. But then in that potential, every entity has its own ability. I mean, not everyone in the same plane would have the same ability, right? So the plane defines the potential, but within that potential, you can have multiple or different abilities to that. And that ability also is related to that receptivity. So whatever I am receptive to right now, the more I become to that, I mean, the more I become able based on that, the more receptivity I get, then more ability, more receptivity. So there is this kind of cycle between ability and receptivity for every unit, but the potential for that plane remains the same, right? So and I have that freedom of development and decline. I mean, if I can either have that development or decline, and once I am a human being, I have that freedom to either develop or decline in that sense, right? So right. So in these three anubhutis, if you'd like to add something, or if there are any questions, we can take it, or then we'll move forward.
Yeah. I really like this format. I mean, it is actually more engaging, definitely. So anyone would like to ask or have a comment on this? See, Bhaiya, you could carry on further.
Sure, sure. Yeah. Bhaiya, I'm assuming that we are on time, right? 45 minutes, so we'll be able to complete this. Huh? Yeah. Just
Bhaiya,
wanted
even
to.
if we are not able to complete, we can do the next session. So please go on in the pace that you are comfortable. So this is
Great.
completely all right.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Bhaiya. So I'll move on to the next one. Uh, the plane is determined from the entity's constitution, process, and conduct, right? So this is again the different way of classifying a plane. If you look into that entity, so the kind of constitution it has, right? A very basic example of if it is constitutionally complete atom, so then automatically it comes into that delusion plane. But if it is not constitutionally complete, it is still into the physico-chemical plane, right? So the constitution can define which plane it is, the process, the way it has come to, and then the conduct. So again, for example, let's say if I am living with, if I mean, if in an entity, if you see that he's living with the dhirta, virda, and udarta, and that is the kind of conduct that you see from him or her. So you could say, okay, he belongs to the deific plane, right? But if you see that Deenta, Hinta, or Krurta Pradhan is what the kind of conduct you expect from him or her, so you could say, okay, this is the delusion plane, right? So based on the constitution and the process and the conduct, we are able to determine where on that plane that entity belongs, right? And then differentiation in plane implies differentiation in reality. Differentiation in reality implies differentiation in conduct and behavior. Differentiation in conduct and behavior implies differentiation in process. And differentiation in process implies differentiation in reality, right? So, as we discussed again, um, so the kind of cycle we were talking about is key once, depending on that plane, you will be able to see key what is the reality of that entity, right? Because once you've classified and you're able to see the plane, you're also able to see key, okay, this is how I can perceive this reality, or this is how I should be seeing that reality. Now, this differentiation in reality implies differentiation conduct and behavior, as we discussed. Ki once you are in that specific plane or based on that plane, you can actually see ki, okay, this is the kind of conduct and behavior you're going to expect from that entity. So, someone who is in the divine plane or the deific plane, you won't be expecting a conduct that is come from a delusion plane, right? And this differentiation in conduct and behavior also implies differentiation in process. So based on that conduct and behavior, so see, everyone has the state and the motion. So if you are in this state, I am in this plane and your state is around that, the kind of motion that you're going to do is also your whole process is also going to get you that direction where you're moving in towards in the direction of a better ability and better receptivity, right? So in that plane, all the processes that you're following, it has a constant development cycle where you're seeing there is this constant development in ability, constant development in your own set of understanding, right? So this conduct and behavior also leads to this differentiation in process, and this process also then again implies differentiation in reality, right? So when I see this anubhuti, I relate to this is kind of the transition that we see. I mean, when we are studying in this whole studying as well, we are trying to behave or we are trying to have our conduct in certain ways. The kind of conduct and behavior that we do, that essentially defines our process. And this process again then leads to the kind of the differentiation in reality that we are seeking for, and then the plane. So if we want to move from the delusion plane to the deific plane, we have a specific process, the specific conducts and behaviors attached to it. And when we follow that, so the process takes us along that whole plane, right? So, so essentially, this is the process that we've been following in the way we study or the study method, right? So in a way, now I mean, every anubhuti that we're talking about, it has multiple facets. And I think that every anubhuti, it points to multiple ways of interpretations or facets that you can get from that. So from the study perspective, this is the kind of interpretation that I take from this one. And there might be other ways of looking at it. And if you have anything to add, you can do that. So I'll just complete the next one and then we'll open it for discussion. Right. So an object bounded from the six sides is referred to as a unit. This is one of the best definitions of a unit. I mean, if you look into a unit, it is bounded by from the top, the bottom, the front, the back, the left, the right, and it's a unit, right? And many such units or sets of all units are referred to as infinite because they're uncountable, lots and infinite of them. And the unbounded state is referred to as absolute energy, right? Which itself is the omnipresent omnipotence. Omnipresence is continuously realized as bliss by humans, right? So this is again the absolute energy we are talking about. And now we are calling it absolute energy, nirpeksh urja, because just to get into a bit detail of it, so energy can be seen as absolute or relative, right? Nirpeksh and sapeksh. So the relative energy depends on that entity, the plane, the kind of entity you are, and the interactions between them. So that energy, whenever it is always relative. But when we are talking about the omnipresent and omnipotence, this is absolute in its sense. By absolute, I mean it does not depend on that entity or the unit or its presence. It is the way it is. So it is absolute in its sense. And it is omni. So this reality, we are trying to refer it to with different words, right? Absolute energy, omnipresent, omnipotence, omniscience. I mean, all the omniscient is not exactly referred to this one, but sorry, the absolute energy, omnipresent, omnipotence. So when we are talking about these words, these are just words and these are certain attributes, certain feelings that we're ascribing to that reality. But this reality, the recitation of these words is not essentially the realization of this entity, right? The realization of the reality would be experienced as bliss by humans, right? So once I experience it, the kind of state that I would be, that is stated as bliss, and that would be actually the realization of this energy. So the words do not completely justify that entity that we are talking about, that reality we are talking about. Units is something that we are still able to realize. I mean, part of that, we are able to see the form, we are able to see the attributes. The intrinsic nature and dharma is something that once we are able to get to the better states of ability, those would also be able to, I mean, those would be something that will be able to perceive it much better. But for this reality, if it had to be realized that it is, the ability has to be, that of an enlightened human being. And this is the path that we are going to realize it the way we want to, right? Now this line actually relates to the next one, so I'll just complete the next one as well. Limited understanding leads to only perception of happiness and unhappiness. Happiness and unhappiness are perceived in man and comprehended in vritti chitta. The continuity of happiness is with intuition in buddhi and realization in atma, which has continuity, right? So from the last statement that we read, omnipresence is continuously realized as bliss by humans. This is a bit of an analysis and an expansion of that one, right? So based on our ability, right, where we are, what plane we belong to, and what has been our own understanding of this omnipresent reality, if we have limited understanding of it, right, it leads to only the perception of happiness and unhappiness, right? Now, uh, the way I like to imagine it is, so for example, if I am tasting something, so let's say I like chocolates a lot, right? So whenever I'm eating that chocolate, so I'm getting a lot of senses, right? Okay, this has this bittersweet taste, or the that chocolatey flavor that I want to have. It has this distinct smell, right? All that. But ultimately, what I'm trying to get out of it is that happiness, that feeling of happiness or unhappiness, right? So if I have that limited understanding, I am only able to perceive that happiness or unhappiness out of it from whatever that body has experienced, right? The ultimate perception as Jivan that I see is just of happiness or unhappiness. Okay, this got me happy, this got me unhappy, right? And this is essentially this whole omnipresent reality that we're talking about. So when I have that limited understanding, but I have not become enlightened, this limited thing becomes the reason that once, see, if I'm not able to perceive this happiness and unhappiness, I would never want its continuity, right? I've Even when I'm sitting here, I am able to see that what this feeling that I got from chocolate, the kind of happiness that I got, this is what I'm looking for, right? The only thing is now I want that continuity of this happiness. I don't want to become unhappy. So that is how that perception becomes the basis for my own journey towards that continuity, right? And then this whole happiness and unhappiness that is perceived in man, I mean the man, vritti, chitta, buddhi and atma. So if you look at that whole trajectory, so this unhappiness and happiness from that body is perceived by man, then I try to comprehend it, right? I want its continuity, whether it was long term or short term, or whether it was continuous or discontinued, whether I want it or not. So I try to analyze it. I comprehend that in vritti and chitta. This continuity of happiness does not happen in vritti and chitta. For that, once that intuition is developed, there the continuity of happiness starts to become something more tangible. And then once that realization happens in Atma, this is where the bliss part comes into place, right? So now this is not unhappiness and happiness anymore. Now that bliss, that continuity of this happiness has come there. So whenever we are perceiving this happiness and this happiness, ultimately in its basic form, it is this absolute energy we are talking about, right? This absolute energy is what we are perceiving as happiness and unhappiness. But based on our ability, the amount of, if we are able to comprehend it, if you're able to then make an intuition about it, and then if we are able to realize it, so these are the states that we flow on to, right? um just one more, I'll take this one. So this perception of happiness and unhappiness, right, this essentially is related to body, or the way I mean, whenever we are talking about this, so the kind of taste, for example, I was taking an example of the chocolate. So when I have to take that taste, I have certain organs which interact with that chocolate to give me that taste. So the part of body that moves and functions according to desire. So I have that desire of being happy, and then they have certain parts of the bodies that move and function according to the desire. Those are then referred to as the cognitive organs, right? Because I have this cognition which drives them. I cannot control my heartbeat. I cannot control I mean, cognitively, I cannot control how my pancreas is working. But if I have to control I mean, so the kind of cognition I want to take from these to interpret what is happening outside reality. So these are the organs of the sound, the touch, the sight, the taste, the smell. I can direct my attention. I at any point of time, I'm listening to so many sounds around me, but I can direct my attention. Okay, this is the sound I want to focus on. I mean, when you're listening to me speak, there might be so many distractions going around you. There would be some gates opening and the sound of the fan, the sound of people talking around you. But if you're listening to me, you have cognitively decided, okay, this is what I want to focus on. So then you are able to drive based on your desire, where I want to focus these organs to. So based on that, the sound, the touch, the sight, I might be seeing so many things, but I direct my focus ki this is I want to see the screen, or this is I want to focus on. So that is how I'm able to drive those organs based on my desire. So this desire essentially comes from the happiness and unhappiness that we had talked earlier, right? So I'll stop here for a while. We'll take up the discussions and other facets that we would like to share. Sorry, this was a bit lengthy that I took in a single flow.
No, this was very beautiful, and I think important thing, but basically this darshan does is that it provides the connectivity between what gets perceived through senses to what gets realized in Atma. So there is a direct connectivity between the two, and there is no, it is one world that we are living in, and Jivan is the world which basically having the connection, which provides the connection between the perceptible world to the realizable world, right? So realization happens in the omnipresence, while the perception happens with the senses. So we start with the senses, and uh, as Achal Bhai said, that basically not having the continuity of happiness is a trigger for us to understand more, right? So we move from perception to comprehension, comprehension to intuition, intuition to realization, right? So that is the progression of awakening. And we are, as human beings, actually have our default setting, or the what we have the basic capability of perception of happiness, and realization actually has the continuity of happiness. So wonderfully explained all the points, and the way that you had elaborated on this, it really came alive.
Great. Thank you, Bia.
Yeah, I guess you could continue further. Hungry for more.
Sure. So if someone would like to add something or any questions that we would like to discuss. Great. So I'll move forward. I'm hoping all of you are, you haven't gotten bored by the monologuous flow that I've been following through the last few Anubhutis.
Not at all, Bhaiya. It's very engaging, as Rakesh Bhaiya said. You're really bringing it alive. So it's really engaging. And I think we are all always baffled by the darshan, so questions don't come so easily. But at the end, like if you would like to explain intuition more, I would be interested. But we'll take that at the end. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Didi. But yeah. So yeah, thank you. So any point of time you start getting, if I'm getting a bit long, you can just raise your hand or point me out, right? So I'll continue with the next set of Anubhutis, right? So the as Bhaiya said, we were talking about, so this cognitive organs we start with, right? And we get a sense of happiness and unhappiness when we have this perception, and then followed by comprehension, and then intuition, right? So this is how we move from the unit based. I mean, when we are just, first of all, we are just perceiving the units, right? And so there's this gradation. I mean, units are easily perceptible because they have this form, they have these attributes which are very easily perceivable from the cognitive organs, right? But as you get to absolute energy, it becomes so fine. So I mean, fine is not the right word, but it does not have that form which could relate with the cognitive organs. So you have to have that sense of fineness within you, and which is that is why you need atma, and atma has that potential to actually realize this, right? But what also happens, and this is how we come to the next anubhuti, the initiative or endeavor towards the result of changing nature is incomplete endeavor, and the initiative or endeavor towards the result of unchanging nature, that is for activity completeness and conduct completeness, is complete endeavor, right? So we all know, right? I mean, we all have that. I mean, I'm assuming that we might all be having some of our vices. For example, I like chocolates, or you might be liking rasgulla, or maybe going for a trip, or having a vacation, or whatever. So we all have certain sets of experiences that we are always looking forward to, and we always want to get to, and we get a sense of happiness from that, right? Now, we could either be focusing on those because they do give that sense of happiness, that sense of pleasure to us. So we can keep taking our initiatives or endeavors towards those activities of changing nature. And why that is the result of changing nature? If you look at that result of happiness that you get from something from that cognitive organs, that has changing nature. I mean, it's a very traditional, a very old example, but it works brilliantly well. The examples of rasgullas, right? So if you have one rasgulla, you have this, oh, I felt a lot of pleasure. Another one, that pleasure gets a bit smaller. Then another one, smaller, smaller. After 10, 15, 20, that 21 becomes a pain. Oh, that becomes from happiness to unhappiness. So that is the kind of changing nature we are talking about. You take a vacation to Goa or to France or to Amsterdam or Switzerland, wherever. So you start feeling very happy for the first week or the second week. Third week, it starts getting boring. After a year, it is like, oh, I cannot take it anymore. I'm done. Sorry. So, so essentially, what is happening is, okay, when we are taking these initiatives or endeavors towards the results of changing nature, we are making that endeavor, but that endeavor is not getting to a result, the kind of result that we are hoping for. And what is that result? That result is that continuity of happiness, right? So that is why this is an incomplete endeavor. It gets you to some place, it gets you from where you are to probably somewhere forward or backward, depending on what you're doing. But it is still incomplete because it does not give you what you were looking for, what the desire is for, right? So here, when we are saying that this desire that drives this cognitive organs, this desire can be having the direction where you are trying to take where you are trying to take initiatives or endeavors which do not give you that completeness of happiness that you're looking for, and that is why that becomes incomplete. But as soon as that desire turns inwards, where you want to say, "Okay, no, now I want to move towards comprehension, towards intuition, towards realization," and that is how we are going to get that continuity of happiness. So this becomes the complete endeavor because it directs you to a place, to a state which has completeness, which has continuity, which has stability. And once where you are there, for example, if you talk about activity completeness, so once you reach that plane of activity completeness, you are there. It is a step where you cannot go backward. So that is a complete endeavor. Similarly, once you reach the state of conduct completeness, again, that is a plane where you are still there and that is not, you are not going to go backward, right? So, incomplete endeavor, the planes do not change. You stay there and just keep on revolving. That is why incomplete. And for complete endeavors, you move forward in a direction where you are not going to go back. There is a distinct step up. There's a distinct transition that you're making. So that is a complete endeavor, right? And okay, this one is a very interesting one. Um, okay, so Shilpa Didi, I'll try to address the intuition part here as well, from what I've understood from this one. The intuition of truth occurs in the eternal and perpetual omnipotence. Intuition of truth leads to enlightenment and realization of truth. Enlightenment and realization of truth leads to balance. Balance leads to exuberance. Exuberance leads to awakening. Awakening leads to resolution. Resolution leads to purity in behavior. Purity in behavior leads to coexistence. Coexistence leads to heavenliness. Heavenliness leads to conflictlessness. Conflictlessness leads to enlightenment of eternal and perpetual truth. Quite a mouthful. So, there are two ways that I like to interpret it, but I'll start with the first one. Okay. Um, so what we are talking about, so this is kind of a cycle, right? Now, this cycle can be taken in two. The first facet that I generally take it, and I think it makes a lot of sense here, that is in terms of tradition. So there is a human being, there is a self, right? And now there is a tradition, the whole humanity, right? Now let's talk about this anubhuti in the sense of the human being and the tradition, the humanity, right? So in the self, in one human being, the intuition of truth occurs in the eternal and perpetual omnipotence, right? So you have been living this life, and that human being, let's say, if I'm talking about the self, or I'm talking about a single person. So this single person, he has been following the whole set of incomplete endeavors, right? And then from these incomplete endeavors, he is able to understand, or he's able to conclude that these are not giving him the continuity, him or her, the continuity of happiness. And that is when that intent, that desire changes towards the complete endeavor. towards the intuition of truth. This intuition is essentially you this is not specifically words. I mean, there is this perception that is always happening in man, right? Then you start comprehending that entity, that reality, and this comprehension is in terms of that analysis, the whole logical connections between the words and everything. And after a while there is a certain sense of intuition that happens, right? Okay, this is the truth. I mean, this is where the direction is. This is not These are not really words now we're talking about. These are this The words have started connecting to that reality behind that thing. I mean, what are we talking about when we're talking about that omnipotence? What are we talking about when we're talking about that absolute energy? That entity, that reality, we start developing certain sense of intuition, right? I mean, see, this is something that I'm just juxtaposing depending on what I have heard. I do not have a lot of personal experience about this whole intuition thing, but I'm just trying to relate it with what I've heard. So what I'm trying to get it from there is that this intuition of truth, right? And you get to that, okay, this is the direction you start getting those senses of, okay, this is what I am looking for. This is what is going to give me that continuity of happiness. This intuition then starts directing your actions, directing your processes and conduct and behaviors, which leads to enlightenment and realization of truth, right? So this intuition which is happening, I'll just go back here, which is happening in buddhi, right? Which is after, I mean, I see it as that intuition is then starting to guide you towards that enlightenment and realization of truth, right? This enlightenment realization of truth leads to balance. Balance in whom? Balance in that individual, in that one person, that one human being where we are talking about. In our case, we are talking, for example, in our case, Babaji. So Babaji went through this process where he has this enlightenment realization of truth, right? This enlightenment realization of truth led to the balance in his living, right? This balance in his living leads to exuberance. This exuberance leads to awakening. This awakening leads to resolution. Now we're talking about this balance, this exuberance, and this whole thing is now, it has happened in Atma, and now it is propagating downwards through the whole Jivan, and it is now presenting itself in terms of resolution. Resolution in your thoughts, resolution in your living. This resolute living leads to purity in behavior. Now, when that person is interacting with entities around him or her, that behavior in purity, this is the conduct we are talking about. We were talking about that in the earlier side. Right? The conduct is the law. So now this law, this truth, this absolute energy, it starts evidencing itself in the purity in behavior of that human being. This human being is now living with in coexistence with everyone around him or her. If you imagine Babaji, so he is leading this whole initiative where people are around him, people are able to see his vyavhar, people are able to see his karya, his thoughts, which we are reading right now, and this leads to that coexistence. So we may not, I mean, if I myself see it, I may not understand this whole, see, I do not have that intuition, I do not have that realization, but based on what I am reading, what I am understanding about him, that sparks that sense of, okay, this is something that is achievable in me, right? And this coexistence leads to heavenliness in the society. This heavenliness in society leads to conflictlessness, the conflict which was happening in the society between different people and different things, and conflict between the nature and the people, and conflict within me where my thoughts and my behaviors and my assumptions are not aligning. All this heavenliness around me that starts leading to that conflictlessness, and this conflictlessness becomes the source in me to attain that enlightenment, right? So based on that process, it might start from a one person, but that one person creates that heavenliness. That heavenliness creates conflictlessness, this whole society. The society then becomes that path to enlightenment and perpetual truth. That way, every human, now all the human beings in the society, it comes into education, that education system, you start delivering this knowledge, this complete thing And so the intuition starts developing for everyone, and this whole cycle continues. And this cycle then ultimately results in a awakened society. So the whole society becomes awakened, right? So if you look into this, this is how I would like to interpret it. I interpret it if we talk about from how does this whole absolute the evidence of this absolute energy transfers from one being to the whole society. This could also be interpreted to explain it within myself, how this intuition leads to better and better understanding and the whole process. So if someone like would like to add that interpretation or any other interpretation of this, I would open it for everyone, right? So again, this was a mouthful, but yeah.
Very nice, Bhaiya. It's very nice. I think you've done a lot of good homework for this. I think it is true that we get a sense of perception through our senses, and that gives one understanding of the reality. We can touch, we can see, we can hear. So that gives a sense of reality. And also, as he said, it gives a perception of happiness and unhappiness, which is which has a transient nature. Then comes the next level when we actually apply some thought to it and try to reason it out. And by that, we arrive at the conclusion. We weigh the options, we deliberate, and that is how we reach the conclusion. So that is also a second level of understanding, which we call it abhas or comprehension, right? So that is it is the basis of, with the perception and comprehension, we are able to actually do the mechanics of life. Like we carry out various things, we talk with people, we interact with people, we engage in work and behavior. But that alone is not sufficient. That alone is not sufficient for our own satisfaction. We require something more. So intuition is that more that is needed. That is basically the understanding more than at the level of logic. It is, it happens at the level of buddhi. So buddhi is in the state of observance of whatever is happening at the level of chit and underneath. So this is the level of understanding the elements of the way the reality is. Okay, irrespective of uh, so that is the, it is the understanding of the order or the being, the understanding of the being, acceptance of that this is the reality, it exists. That acceptance actually happens at the level of intuition. The comprehension and perception then start serving that. So unless the comprehension is incomplete, the intuition cannot happen. Comprehension has to become complete. It has to reach a conclusion that I need. So the process of adhyan or the study actually addresses first the comprehension. It basically allows us through words by reaching a conclusion that what is the right behavior, what is the reality. It allows us to actually understand the things in a logical fashion. That is the first and necessary step to actually understand the things at the level of intuition. Intuition is to actually understand the orderliness of the things, to understand things as absolute realities. Like, for example, when Babaji attained the state of samadhi, he understood the existence of self at the intuitive level. That means that even when his thought was silent, his desire was silent, his senses were, he was not, he was, his mind, his man was silent. Even that, the sense of I am remained. That is that is a intuition. It is not a logical conclusion. It is something which is beyond that. So that is one example of intuition, that I am, that I exist, right? So, and then after that, in the process of Sanyam, he started adding more realities to that and slowly actually built the whole network of or the darshan of how I am and how all the realities are and what is their interrelationship. So what we are also doing is we are also actually first understanding the logical at the logical level. Then we are accepting those realities as the eternal realities, that okay, I am is the reality. Development progression is a reality. Awakening progression is a reality, and all these realities are together. Okay. So that actually becomes an intuitive level of understanding of existence. That actually becomes the basis for realization. Having the intuition is the is it's also called the direct perception or sakshatkar. It is not a deduced understanding, that it is not a logical understanding that you are actually saying. It is after logic has been satisfied, you are actually having the understanding of tattva or the element itself. That understanding is actually permanent and it is unshakable. Okay. Because that is about, that resonates with the reality the way it is in existence. Okay. And then after that, whatever logic that you use, that intuition becomes the basis of that, right? It's because that is a higher faculty. Then buddhi takes charge. So right now the what is at the charge of our life or is actually our imagination, or our logic is in the charge of our life, right? So that is what is in the driving seat. Or for example, our senses are at the driving seat. So whatever our senses demand, we keep doing that. Second is level is that whatever is our logic demands, we keep doing. Third is when we actually reach the level, whatever is our understanding is, that actually based on that we do everything, right? That is actually called the living with the intuitive sense of reality. And finally, it is the living based on realization. That is Anubhav Mulak Vidhi. That is once you have, it is not a concept anymore. It is a reality and you are part of that reality. So that is the goal of this whole process of Adhyan, to actually reach the state in which you are actually rooted in the reality and have the, and that fountainhead is there inside you to actually express that reality as it is. So uh, I know that I took a little longer than.
It was quite good there. The this the way now this first line and the second, I mean, how you connected them, this was quite good. I mean, this I was able to get more detailed on this one, ki how this all connected together. Specifically that Samadhi wala part where you have this I am intuition and then how it relates to how you move forward from that. So this is very insightful. Yeah.
Bhaiya, I also feel that I am was the first intuition that Babaji got. Okay. So that is the starting point. And I feel for us also, acceptance of Jivan is the starting point, which we say that at the intuitive level, the acceptance that I am different from the body. that I and body are two distinct realities. Okay. This acceptance basically can only be the basis for understanding the order in the universe. We cannot accept the order in the universe when we ourselves are uh, identified with the changing nature, right? So once we are actually identified with the immortal nature of ourselves, only then can we tune ourselves with the eternal nature of existence. Okay, so the first intuition that we will have is that our own immortality and our own distinction from the body. Okay, so that becomes the basis for actually having the intuitions for all other things, and all of them, all these realizations or all these insights need to get stringed together. Okay, and when they all string together, they form our whole avdharana or the concept, and that concept becomes the basis for realization. Okay.
That was a very good addition. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I think just one more on the Bhuti is left. We have 3 minutes. I think we should complete it then. Uh,
Ji.
okay. So differentiation in need itself determines differentiation in goal, wherein human life is successful with the spiritual goal, that is awakening of the sentient aspect. Otherwise, it is only unsuccessful. Unresolved thoughts lead to behavioral obstacles, and refined sanskar lead to behavioral ease. I think from all our discussions above, this is quite self-evident. I believe this is would be the crux of everything that we're saying, and what I take it as the final takeaway from the chapter. So basically, what we need to understand is that whatever goal that I set, right, based on that the need. So if my need is for is towards the incomplete endeavor, or is it towards the complete endeavor, right? My need is towards fulfilling the need of cognitive organs, or is it towards understanding the absolute truth? So based on that need, I all the it also differentiates the goal where I want to move, right? And when very specifically the human life is successful. I mean, if you look at it, the human life, the intent is not to, have more senses of just that the whole sense. I mean, being happy with the senses, but the actual goal of human life is understanding the spiritual goal. That is the awakening of the sentient aspect, the realization of this absolute energy that we're talking about. Otherwise, this is only successful, and it makes sense. I mean, if you keep on doing incomplete endeavors whole life, do you think it is successful? It won't be. So if we are saying talking about complete endeavors, we are moving toward complete endeavors that leads to a successful life, right? And the last one, unresolved thoughts lead to behavioral obstacles, and refined sanskar lead to behavioral ease, which is again very obvious that if I have conflicts in my own thought, right, my own thoughts are unresolved. And I think all of us, or at least I have observed it multiple times, that if my thoughts are all over the place and I'm feeling, quite of stuck with how things are going, and I do not have clarity of my path, so the way I behave completely changes. My conduct completely changes. I might be irritable. I might be, So this is something which is very perceptible when we see in our day-to-day life. But as soon as there is this, even a small bit of resolution in the thoughts, that leads to a lot of change in the behavior, how we behave with other people, how we conduct ourselves, how we interact with things around us, how whether we are using nature for abundance, or whether you're using nature for exploitation. So that whole thing depends on what kind of thoughts, and those thoughts then come from that intuition, and that is how the whole thing goes on. So just to sum that whole thing up, we talked about the plane and the transplane, the differentiations between those two realities. Then we went into the detailings of how the planes are and how differentiations happens along that. And Going forward, we also covered how the whole study method or the method of realization, how it works, the cycles related to that. We talked about incomplete endeavors, the incomplete endeavors which are focused mainly on the cognitive organs and the planes. And then we talked about how the complete endeavor is towards the trans plane, realizing the trans plane, and then how it evidences itself in terms of bliss in human beings. And we went through the process of how it happens in a one human being and the whole society, and the intricacies of it. And finally, based on that, we finally land on what kind of goal do we want to, or what kind of need do we want to set for ourselves, and what are the results of that. And again, just one more thing I'll highlight with this one is that we have absolute freedom in choosing which path we take. What Babaji is saying here is, you take this path, you go here. You take this path, you go here. Based on the differentiation in your desire and the goal, this is where you land up. But ultimately, the freedom of development, or so this line which was here, just relating it to that one. Development or decline, that rests with us. So we choose whether we want to go towards development or decline, and all our actions and behavior in that direction finally leads to the result that we ultimately get. And then with that, the final wish, may there be universal well-being. And with that, I end it. Thanks everyone for listening. Well, we are a bit overboard the time, but I think this was good enough. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thanks a lot for listening so patiently. And especially thanks to Rakesh Bhaiya for giving me this opportunity to present my rendition of the chapter 8. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
That was wonderful, Bhaiya. A round of applause for you. So it was very well done, and maybe I hope that you do some more chapters in this. And I thoroughly enjoyed this. You have done a lot of hard work in preparing for this. I'm sure that all other people who are listening to this would also say the same. Yeah. So thank you for making it alive. Um, Spencer, you want to say something?
No, I just echo what you said. I thoroughly enjoyed the combination of the nice microphone and your voice and your preparation. It made it very easy to listen, and just the way you present is very slow and systematic. So I was able to follow along the whole time. So yeah, thank you so much for that.
Thanks a lot. Hi, Estelle. I was assuming that Spencer was signed in through two systems, but now I'm seeing, okay, Estelle is here. So hi, hello.
Yeah, it was me the whole time.
Hey, Shilpa Didi, you want to say something?
Yeah, so I just want to congratulate you, Bhaiya. It was really well done, very engaging. And I'm very thankful today I could listen to the whole session, because many times I'm not able to, because the timing is like, family time and dinner time.
Yeah.
So it was really good. And, in the end, how you even like summed up the whole thing, that was also very nice. So yeah, I think, listen to the recording again. So very well
Oh.
done.
Thank you, Didi.
Thank
And
you.
thanks again for listening so patiently. I mean, with all the family times and everything, I can totally understand. So you actually took out this whole time and listened to me. That's very gratifying. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, so I guess we will now close this session, and hope to meet you again on this Saturday. And thank you so much, and see you again. Namaste.
Thank you, everyone. Namaste, Sadiko.
Namaste,
Thank you.
Sadiko.
Namaste.
Stay.
Hey.